Hello everybody, I'm Raphael Perry and it's time for another update on the Bloodsword computer game. The update came out yesterday, but I've delayed it till Monday because videos do typically get lower viewing figures if released at the weekend. So this is again straight from Victor, and I'll, read through and offer what insight and additional information I am permitted. Okay, so I know it's been a while since my last update, and honestly, the silence wasn't part of any master marketing plan. Over the last month, half my family came down with chickenpox. Balancing the roles of a dad, a makeshift nurse, and an indie developer meant something had to give. Naturally, I couldn't stop the development train, so I just put my head down, drank too much coffee, and kept grinding out code in the quiet hours. Writing posts on my social media had to take a back seat. But the silence was productive. Here is a look at the heavy lifting going on behind the scenes to make Bloodsword tick. So here we have a character sheet, equipped items, other items, nice little health bar on the side, and of course all four members of the whole party. And the Orb of Mystery. This is an item from Book 2. Releases a surge of mind-shattering energy. Every combatant, friend and foe alike, loses 3d6 endurance if they fail to resist this psychic attack. Armor gives no protection, because armor never gives any protection against psychic attacks. Usable in combat as a full action, consumed on use. A deep blue orb, veiled in flickering... We can't read the rest of it. Okay. Wonderful. Flickering smoke. Okay. So there is a way to get the whole image. It's fine. Usables and avoiding instant deaths. Loot in Bloodsword is rarely just a +1 sword. It's a vial of black liquid, an emerald scarab, or a mysterious birchbark scroll. Why does that birchbark scroll sound very familiar? I've introduced a unified usable component that handles items you can pop both in combat and during exploration. We've got the Maeve potion working and completely reworked the Orb of Bestowing, Orb of Fire and Orb of Plague into functional usable items with custom sound effects so they feel satisfying to trigger. So there were 5 orbs the player could obtain in Book 2, but they could only choose one of them. And 2 or 3 of them were nasty, tricky items that would make you suffer when you tried to use them. They weren't very nice items. But here is when the candid reality of indie dev kicks in. Not everything on paper works on a screen. Oh, we're going to go into so much detail about that soon. I'm pretty sure I know where this is going. I spent some time fixing the mystery orb item and the psychic damage type specifically to avoid what I can only describe in my commit logs as fixed GG insta-death. In a book, an instant death gotcha is a funny turn to paragraph 14 moment. In a video game, it just makes the player want to uninstall. Balancing the literary integrity of the original text with modern fair game design, think the brutal yet fair nature of Darkest Dungeon, is a tightrope walk. And yes, if you lose the scabbard of the Bloodsword, it will now probably trigger a main quest failure. Don't lose the scabbard. I warned you. That's a book 3 reference. That's a major book 3 reference. And they do warn you right at the beginning of the book, don't lose the scabbard. And you can lose it, and if you do, it doesn't end well for you. Blurring the line between combat and story, and this is actually... because I've had a chat with Victor about this, and I kind of like what he's done, and I will explain in a bit, because I may need to add some. But anyway, in most RPGs, combat and narrative exist in separate silos. You fight the monsters, then you read the dialogue. Game books don't work like that. Fleeing a fight, trying to magically enthrall an enemy mid-battle, or using an environmental trick to instantly pivot the combat back into a story paragraph. To support this, I've built out a comprehensive encounter actions database. it maps specific narrative triggers directly into the combat grid. This means we now have fully implemented mechanics for special actions that can instantly interrupt an active encounter and branch you straight back into the story system. If the book says you can pull a lever mid-battle to drop a portcullis on a snow vampire, the grid now seamlessly talks to the Ink story engine to make that happen, meaning the lever will actually be on the grid and you have to go over and interact with it. And this is so important. I'm opening that in a new tab. This is probably the biggest change from the original game books, for a very good reason. The adaptation trap, adapting the sage's healing. This brings me to the absolute crux of adapting a gamebook. You simply cannot transfer mechanics verbatim. The sage's healing ability is the perfect example. In the original book, the rules state that every single time you turn to a new paragraph, a non-combat paragraph, you can pause, sacrifice an amount of your own endurance, roll 1d6 minus 2, multiply the result by your sacrificed health, and then manually distribute the remaining points among the party. So just to reiterate here, I've pulled up PDF of book 1, when you attempt to heal, you decide how many points of endurance you are going to use. You deduct these from your endurance, then roll 1 die minus 2, and multiply this by the number of points you expended. The result is the healing energy, in the form of endurance points, that you are able to draw from the cosmic flux. These points may be distributed as you wish among the players, including yourself. No player can increase his or her endurance above its initial score, of course. And then we have an example as well. So, Alfric is a sage who decides to expend 5 endurance in a healing attempt. He thus rolls 1 die minus 2 and multiplies the figure by 5, rolling a 4 on the die, 4 minus 2 is 2, say, and thus getting a total of 10 endurance points. He could restore his own endurance to what it was before he tried the healing, and this would still leave him with 5 points to distribute to himself or his companions as he wishes. Now, and negative results count as a 0. This essentially means, if you have the sage in the party, that every time you turn to a new section, you have a 4 in 6, or really 2 in 3, chance of gaining some endurance points. However, if you want to at least recoup your losses, it's a 50-50, a 1 in 2 chance. Well, it's a 3 in 6, but it's still a 1 in 2. It's the same odds, really. And on that half the time that you don't get anything, 1 in 3 times you'll get back the amount you put in. This also means you can afford to roll a few 1s and 2s and get no endurance back, because when you roll 5s and 6s back, or even 4s, you're kind of making up for those previous losses. The odds were good and in the player's favour, and it's a great system for if you're sitting around a table with your mates, or on the living room carpet around a chessboard with sheets of torn up paper to create the correct shapes of the game maps on that chessboard, with a number of chess pieces, a pencil sharpener, an eraser, and a few other things, maybe even a few dice being used to represent the characters in the fight. Yeah, we went pretty old school back in the day, However, if you put that into a computer game, there's going to be problems. How does the game know how many endurance points you want to sacrifice? And when they come back, how does the game know who you want to give them to? And there's a lot of work that would need to go into doing this, and it's a lot of micromanagement that many players would simply not enjoy. So what do you do instead? Do you put everyone on full health at the start of every fight? Well, there are moments in the narrative where someone could fall down a cliff, or they could be malnourished due to starvation or something, where endurance can be lost outside of combat. So do you then just apply that as damage at the start of the next fight, or what? Generally, the amount of healing that was available in the series was so great that you could pretty much guarantee on the heroes being very near to full health at the start of every fight, if not exactly all fully healed. But some of the fights were so hard you did need that much healing in between fights. So let's see what Victor's written. On paper, it's a neat risk-reward maths puzzle. In a video game, it's a pacing nightmare, forcing the player to stop, interact with a UI prompt, and crunch formulas at every single node of dialogue would completely destroy the flow of the narrative. So I had to redesign it from the ground up while keeping the spirit of the mechanic intact. I leaned into the fiction. Now, whenever the party travels between locations, the sage uses that downtime to meditate, actively drawing out their own life energy from a cosmic flux and sealing it into a tangible, consumable item. The engine places this bottled life force in their inventory with the proper but subtle notification message. When the sage finally pops it in or outside of combat to save an ally, my newly built sage life force component takes over. It calculates the exact amount of health restored, strictly checking maximum health caps so you aren't penalised for overhealing, and dynamically drains the sage's own endurance for half that amount. It preserves the brutal sacrificial triage of the original text, but turns it into a tactile, frictionless system. Oh, and did I mention you can also upgrade and change this consumable via the passive skill tree? Yeah, so Sage's Blood File restores 1d6-1 endurance. Using on an ally drains the sage for half the amount restored. Can be applied during or outside of combat. Infused with the sage's life force, requires the sage to have endurance remaining. I don't believe this can inflict enough damage to outright kill the sage, because if it does, no healing will be applied. Which means there's a limit on how much endurance the sage can lose and how much endurance can be restored to the recipient. Also, the sage can use this on themselves, in which case they'll simply restore half the amount instead of, it's not a matter of the healing happens first, then the damage happens first. It's just simultaneously cancelled out and the sage just gets half the healing. And the skill tree does allow this to be upgraded from a low-level file to a medium-level file and a high-level file. The fact that it can be used inside combat is something that wasn't possible in the original series, where healing was something that was best done when the patient is not fighting for their life. You need them to lie down and relax and receive medical attention, or, their body needs to be still for the magical energy to transfuse itself into them. The sage needs to be calm and collected and able to meditate and not in the middle of a battle. This does mean that you can essentially deal damage to your own sage in the middle of a fight. So it's a balancing act. You have to decide how much risk the sage is in. Is he surrounded by foes and at risk of being beaten to a bloody pulp if the badly hurt enchanter consumes a blood vial? Or is he in a relatively safe position? Is he currently taking the defense action so it's harder for enemies to hit him? And so on, right? Using it outside combat feels like the old way it was done, but using it inside combat makes it an active part of the action economy of combat, but also an active risk for the player to gauge and decide if they want to do it. And I like the ingenuity of that. What do we have here? This is from Book 2. I recognize this. A bubbling roar echoes through the ice. The monster has had enough. Spilling greasy black blood from numerous wounds, it pulls its remaining appendages back into the water. Under the sheet of ice on which you are standing, you see the eye blink once, inscrutably, then sink into the depths. You gain 1 skill point. I think that's everyone gains 1, not just one of the heroes. You walk on through the deepening shadows of night to the coast. This is a battle on the ice against a many-tentacled monster that bursts up through the ice to attack the heroes. I see 4 here, presumably 1 for each hero. And this is interesting because this is leveling mid-adventure, whereas in the original adventure you'd level once at the end of each book, essentially. Quality of life and user experience. Behind the scenes, the game has got significantly smarter. As an engineer, I want a buttery smooth experience, so I refactored our healing encounters to load that data on demand, rather than preloading the entire database into memory. Even for a 2D RPG, memory management matters. I know UI friction is the bane of many gamers, so I spent time adding a ton of much-needed keyboard navigation. You can now cycle through the character sheet tabs seamlessly using Tab and hit 1 to 4 to instantly select specific party members, less clicking, more surviving. I've also heavily overhauled how information is conveyed. This system now actively flags unspent skill points via dedicated UI notifications and story pop-ups, so you never forget to level up. For world navigation. Information is conveyed for world navigation, I presume. Developing an indie RPG is an exercise in building a massive, intricate clockwork machine while it's actively ticking, even when life throws a virus at your household. I'm getting very close to having all the foundational gears locked in, turning the narrative of Bloodsword into an uncompromising tactical experience. If you enjoy old-school RPG mechanics and want to support a one-man studio, please consider adding Bloodsword to your Steam wishlist. Every single click helps this journey continue. And you know what? We can't see how many people have wishlisted the game, can we? But we know it was a very high number some time ago. I think, what was it, 5,000 people at least back in February, and that was 2 months ago. So hey, it's probably even higher now. Right, well, as you all know, I'm a big fan of the Bloodsword series and will absolutely be playing this when it becomes available. You can obviously find my old playthrough of the PDFs of the original game books on my channel. I imagine there will be differences and similarities, and hey, it'll be fun to experience it when the time comes. As usual, I'll keep you informed of any updates regarding this game, and I'll look forward to seeing you all next time. I'll say bye for now and thank you all very much for watching. Cheerio, everybody.